Recently, there have been circulating reports regarding the health of Bishop T.D. Jakes, the well-known pastor, author, and spiritual leader. Whispers have become louder for months. What is he concealing? Are his family members finally speaking up? Surprising new information has surfaced today directly from people who know him well. And believe me when I say that you will want to hear every detail because you will be shocked by what his family ultimately acknowledged. Bishop T.D. Jakes has been a prominent person in the church and the globe for many years. His impact extends well beyond the pulpit. His conferences sell out venues and his sermons reach millions of people. But lately, the focus of discussions about him has changed from his leadership and preaching to something much more intimate and wearisome: his health. Everywhere, questions have been popping up. Why has his attendance at some events decreased? Why do some of his most recent public engagements portray the bishop in a different light than many were accustomed to? And why did his family ultimately choose to come forward and disclose the truth after months of silence? We will reveal everything in this video, starting with the whispers behind the scenes to the startling revelations that his family has now verified, as well as the potential effects on his ministry, legacy, and the millions of people who admire him. You will see why these disclosures are significant not only for Bishop Jake, but also for the entire religious community if you stick with me as we dissect this story in detail. And believe me when I say that what you're going to learn is much more illuminating than the internet gossip. We must first examine Bishop T.D. Jakes' identity and the significance of his presence in the world in order to comprehend why worries over his health have generated such a commotion. Bishop Jake has been more than a preacher for decades. He has been a symbol of culture. With tens of thousands of members and millions of people watching online from all around the world, his ministry, the Potter's House, expanded from a modest congregation to a mega church. His novels are now bestsellers. His media presence has maintained him in the public eye for years, and his conferences such as Woman Thou Art Loosed and Meepest have influenced countless lives. Such influence is uncommon. In addition to being a pastor, Bishop Jake is also a household name, a brand, and a spiritual father to many. And the world takes attention when someone of that size starts exhibiting even the smallest indications of health issues. Conversation is sparked by every shift in his tone, every stop in his gait, and every missed appointment. That's because Bishop Jake is more than simply a preacher to millions of people. He is giving strength, direction, and hope. Here's the reality. Bishop Jake has faced several difficulties which has contributed to the achievement. He has been candid about his experiences with stress, fatigue, and the physical and mental toll that leadership may have throughout the years. After all, pastors are still people. However, the amount of work he does, the travel, the public appearances, the writing, and the preaching can be quite taxing on one's health. Thus, when concerns about his health started to surface, they weren't merely rumors. They originated from sincere individuals who have long turned to him for spiritual support. Online rumors suggested anything from fatigue to more severe ailments. However, nothing was evident. Fans and followers were eager for answers because of this ambiguity. This is where the situation becomes even more intriguing. Bishop Jake has been largely silent on the matter, but his family has recently taken action and decided to make public information that has up until now been carefully kept under wraps. What has actually been going on behind the scenes has been clarified by their remarks. Furthermore, the public's perception of him may shift as a result of those disclosures. Let's examine the time frame in more detail before delving into what his family ultimately disclosed. When did these health issues first appear, and what made folks think something more serious was happening? The world takes notice when a leader like Bishop T.D. Jakes starts to exhibit even the slightest changes. The initial indications that aroused popular alarm weren't particularly striking. Not at the beginning, anyway. To those who had watched him for years, they felt out of the ordinary, even if they were subtle and nearly simple to ignore. His teachings were the setting for a few of these incidents. Viewers started to note that he paused more frequently than normal to regain his breath, or that his previously loud, animated voice occasionally held a softer tone. Many initially dismissed it as the weariness that comes with growing older or the demanding nature of ministering to thousands of people every week. However, the pattern got more difficult to overlook over time. His physical presence was an additional indication. Bishop Jake has long been renowned for his charismatic stage presence, which includes his gestures, movements, and interactions with audiences. However, during several appearances, fans observed that he appeared to move more cautiously and occasionally leaned on the podium for a little longer than usual. It appeared to some that his energy had changed. Social media was ablaze with inquiries. Was he worn out? Was he working too much? Or was there a more severe issue at hand? There was yet more conjecture. Online rumors started to circulate in 2022 and 2023 that Bishop Jake had discreetly withdrawn from a number of public engagements. For example, internet viewers observed fewer live appearances than previously, he skipped several conferences, and others filled in at speaking engagements. His sermons were still being transmitted, but many couldn't help but worry if his health was preventing him from fulfilling some of his obligations. Then the online theories started to surface. According to some, he was struggling with fatigue from decades of continuous ministering. Others claimed that the strain of overseeing a worldwide church network and stress had taken a toll. Some even conjectured about particular medical ailments, although there was no evidence to support any of those claims. Nevertheless, it was evident that the discussion had become too loud to ignore. The public's curiosity wasn't the sole reason for their concern. It was personal to many. Bishop Jake served as a spiritual father figure who helped people deal with uncertainty, loss, and adversity. People were uneasy about the possibility that he may have major health problems. This is where the story changes though, as one online fan wrote, "He's always been the one to pray us through. Now we want to know if he needs us to pray him through." The Jake family said nothing as speculations circulated. Bishop Jake himself made no public remarks regarding his health, and they did not respond to the rumors. Although reasonable, this silence merely led to additional inquiries. People started to question whether the family was concealing something more significant. Then it took place. Bishop Jake's family eventually made the decision to speak out after months of rumors and conjecture. Because of what they disclosed, which many had not anticipated, their remarks brought both relief and new questions. The health of Bishop T.D. Jakes was kept under wraps for months. Viewers tried to read between the lines of every public appearance, sermon excerpt, and video clip. However, his family's remarks were more powerful than any rumor or news when they ultimately spoke forward. There was no grandiose news conference or pre-arranged announcement to accompany the revelation. It appeared in a number of sincere statements made in private discussions and at family-led gatherings that were subsequently made public. Sarah Jakes Roberts, his daughter, and other members of the Jake family alluded to what many had long assumed. It's true that Bishop Jakes had been dealing with health issues that needed care. For those who knew him, the problem was not a single diagnosis but rather the culmination of years of physical strain, stress, and responsibility. Consider the emotional strain of leading a worldwide congregation for decades, along with the constant preaching, counseling, travel, book tours, and filmmaking. Anyone would suffer as a result of this. And in Bishop Jake's case, it finally got to the point where his family was unable to ignore it any longer. One relative disclosed that they had often reminded him to put rest and health first, stressing that his body could no longer function at the same level. He had persevered through exhaustion for years, frequently masking his difficulties with a strong sermon or a grin. However, those closest to him realized over time that his health needed to take precedence over ministry. Bishop Jake's family clarified that he was not experiencing an unexpected medical crisis, unlike what some rumors had claimed. Rather, they acknowledged that he had been under a great deal of emotional and physical stress. A season of vital recalibration, they explained, one in which he needed to slow down, recuperate, and shift his attention back to longevity instead of speed. This is where a lot of people were taken aback. This was not presented as a setback by the family. Rather, they referred to it as a necessary respite that would enable Bishop Jake to serve for many years to come. They stressed that although his health issues were genuine, they could be resolved as long as he took the time to rest and change his way of life. There was a sigh of relief among fans who had anticipated the worst, a serious illness or retirement. But the family's candor also raised more serious issues. What would happen to the Potter's house if Bishop Jake had to take a back seat? Would his kids, like Sarah and Cora, assume more responsibility? Would Bishop Jake's move from the spotlight to a more mentoring role mark the start of a new chapter? The disclosures also touched on a profoundly human reality. Even religious leaders who seem to be above the fray are susceptible. By acknowledging that Bishop Jake required medical attention and recuperation, the family served as a reminder to everyone that strength is not the lack of weakness, but rather the ability to take time to rest and recuperate. And the family added a new dimension just when everyone believed the story was settled. They made hints that Bishop Jake's choice to be more open about his health will influence his future ministry as well as his personal path. To put it another way, his hardships might serve as a testament and a model for others on how to manage their health, careers, and faith. This is where things become even more intriguing, though. There is more to the narrative than what has been made public, according to several insiders. Even though the family presented an image of healing and rebirth, what would it entail for his future job if certain things were still being kept secret? In the following section, we will examine how these revelations are already impacting his ministry and public role, as well as the potential implications for the Potter's house's future. The impact of Bishop T.D. Jake Jakes' family's eventual disclosure of his ailment extended much beyond their own house. Every personal struggle for a leader of his caliber turns into a public issue, and the news had an impact on his ministry, his congregation, and the worldwide Christian community, which looks to him for direction. Many members had already seen the changes at one of the biggest and most prestigious churches in the United States, the Potter's House in Dallas. Bishop Jake had occasionally preached with the same fervor for which he was famous. But on other Sundays, he appeared more composed, introspective, and occasionally physically constrained. Those minor observations now made sense, as the family confirmed his health concerns. Some churchgoers were relieved, stating that they now understood the rationale behind some of the changes that had been made. There had been an increase in the number of guest speakers. Family members and trustworthy colleagues were given more and more leadership duties. Most notably, Sarah Jakes Roberts had been taking on a more significant role as a pastor in her own right, in addition to being his daughter, and she led in a way that appealed to younger generations. Conversations concerning succession, a term that is highly significant in church leadership, have been triggered by this change. Bishop Jake has been the focal point of the Potter's house for many years. Both optimism and fear have been aroused by the idea of him retreating, even if only slightly. Hope, since it is obvious that his offspring and heirs can continue the vision. T.D. Jake is irreplaceable to many people, which causes concern. The influence has been equally significant outside of the church. Once drawing tens of thousands of people in person and millions online, his seminars are starting to take on a slightly different style. Bishop Jake has been more deliberate about his pacing and frequently shares the platform with others. Even though he still shows up and speaks, this appeared to be a purposeful shift to some. Others perceived it as an inevitable effect of his ailment. Then, there is his public persona. Bishop Jake has consistently exuded authority, fortitude, and strength. He has long been regarded as a spiritual giant who appears impervious to the weaknesses of everyday existence. But now that his family has made his difficulties public, his reputation has changed. One could argue that it has become softer. People are seeing the man behind the pulpit a father, a husband, and a human being dealing with the same issues as the rest of us, instead of just the charismatic preacher. It's interesting to see that this change hasn't lessened his impact. In fact, it might have made it deeper. Hearing about his health issues helped him seem more genuine and accessible to many of his fans. His family's recognition of his difficulties has given him a newfound level of credibility rather than concealing them. It demonstrated that leadership and vulnerability can coexist. However, pressure also comes with this transparency. The questions that are currently making the rounds in church halls, internet forums, and media sources are: what does the future hold for Bishop Jake? Will he retire early? Will he pass the baton fully to Sarah Jakes Roberts? Or will he continue preaching, but with a lighter schedule? Changes are already being implemented behind the scenes, according to insiders. The Potter's House is strengthening its leadership structures. Bishop Jake is not being overworked, and media projects are being re-evaluated to guarantee sustainability. Additionally, conference planning now emphasizes shared leadership more to ensure that he is not the only one carrying the load. This is where it becomes even more fascinating, though. Despite the fact that these changes appear to be a hint of a change, some family members maintain that Bishop Jake has no plans to stand down entirely. They contend that rather than retiring, he views this as a time for introspection. He may slow down, but he isn't giving up, to put it another way. However, the truth is that his health disclosures have altered public perceptions of his ministry. A mixture of anxiety, uncertainty, and hope accompany the fragility of what once seemed unbreakable. Worry that the man so many depend on may not be there all the time. He is unsure of who will take over as leader when he is unable to, and he hopes that the leaders and youngsters he has spent years training will carry on his legacy. This, however, is the portion that no one can overlook. The story spreads outside the church when a leader like Bishop Jake has health issues. It permeates the public sphere, influencing conversations in the media, on social media, and even within competing ministries. And that's our next step: what these disclosures indicate for his wider impact in faith, media, and society, as well as how the world outside his flock is responding. The impact of Bishop T.D. Jakes' health issues extended much beyond the Potter's home when his family eventually acknowledged them. As soon as word spread about his health, it wasn't only churchgoers discussing it. It was being talked about in religious podcasts, trending on social media, and even being covered by mainstream news sites on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Posts poured in by the thousands. His sites were overflowing with personal testimonies, prayers, and words of encouragement from supporters. Many posted messages along the lines of, "Bishop Jake has poured into us for decades. It's time we pour back into him." Trending hashtags urging prayer and support brought people from all walks of life together who were concerned about the welfare of a man they had never met in person, but who had had a significant influence on their lives. The generational gap was one of the most noticeable features of the public response. Concern was voiced by older supporters who had known Bishop Jake since the beginning of Woman, Thou Art Loosed. But they also showed a great deal of respect for the family's openness. Younger audiences responded with a mixture of surprise and awe, many of whom had found him through YouTube sermons or partnerships with his daughter Sarah. In a time when public leaders frequently conceal their difficulties until it is too late, they viewed his vulnerability as a unique instance of candor from a leader. The story was swiftly picked up by the media. The ramifications for the Potter's House's future are examined in religious literature. Secular media presented it as a component of a broader discussion on the health costs associated with leadership pressures. Headlines range from Bishop Jake's family speaking out despite rumors to worries about his health growing. Every headline increased public interest, conjecture, and conversation. However, not every response was positive. Critics surfaced, as is frequently the case with well-known individuals. Others questioned if the family was being completely open, speculating that the well-chosen language might be downplaying a more significant problem. Others charged that the church was attempting to manipulate the story in order to keep its members from becoming alarmed. Despite being less numerous, their voices further polarized an already delicate subject. Spiritual leaders and other pastors started to weigh in at the same time. Some expressed their support in public, urging prayer and unity. Others made subtle allusions to succession, implying that this was an inevitable chance for the following generation of leaders to assume leadership roles. Some even took advantage of the occasion to stress the value of ministry balance and warn that too many leaders burn out under the strain of unrelenting demands. The story's connection to larger societal discussions only served to heighten its appeal. Talking about burnout, mental health, and the unspoken cost of leadership has grown more common in society in recent years. Bishop Jake's health tale was a fantastic fit for that story, serving as a metaphor for what happens when even the strongest people are compelled to take time out to look after themselves. The media really leaned in at this point. They were covering more than just Bishop Jake. He was being framed as a component of a larger scheme. Numerous pastors from other denominations have been stepping down or slowing down due to health issues, and articles and broadcasts have connected his predicament to the growing awareness of pastoral burnout. To put it another way, his story was about more than just him. It had to do with a more significant crisis in spiritual leadership. The public continued to speculate in the meanwhile. Was this really merely a case of relaxation and reorientation? Or was there a more severe matter being kept under wraps? There was opportunity for interpretation because the family did not provide detailed details. Furthermore, interpretation frequently devolves into assumption in the media-driven world of today. Regardless of whether one was critical, skeptic, or supporting, one thing was certain. Bishop Jake was now at the focus of a worldwide discussion. Everywhere, his name appeared in headlines, trending lists, and timelines. It served as a reminder to some that even the most powerful presidents can be vulnerable. For others, it served as a reminder to cherish and pay tribute to him while he was still serving. And as this all happened, another thing became evident. The world wasn't merely responding to his health condition. It was keeping a tight eye on what was going to happen next. Would he be more resilient when he returned? Would he take another step back? Or would this be the start of a protracted, slow change that would alter both T.D. Jake's legacy and the Potter's house's future?